Well, welcome. I wanted to take this opportunity to introduce myself first. So Eric Mundall, HR Director at CSE. I'm about, I think, 4 weeks in, and have just really been enjoying getting a chance to connect with people, where there's opportunities to meet people in person. That's been a lot of fun as well, and certainly looking forward to the opportunity to share this time with you. Really appreciate you making the time to really get into the navigating difficult performance conversations, the simplified performance review process. I think you're going to find this training helpful. And hoping too that there'll be some practical opportunities as well to be able to use what it is that you're learning, so that you can apply this confidently as you have opportunities then to engage with employees through the delivery of the review, the performance review. So with that, I want to turn things over to Christina McGuire. Christina is with the Office of Human Resources Leadership and Talent Development Team. She and I, before coming to CSE, I worked at the Office of Human Resources, had a number of opportunities, terrific opportunities to be able to work with Christina. So really appreciate her being here. And with that, Christina, I am going to turn things over to you.
Yeah. Thank you, Eric, and thank you everyone for joining us today for this conversation about performance reviews. We're going to start in a moment here. We have a message from the Dean, so we'll play that, and then we will talk about the strategies to write and deliver effective performance reviews, along with some strategies for navigating difficult performance conversations that, if they do arise during the course of the year or this year-end activity, you have some confidence and some strategies and some options in which to navigate them effectively. So with that, I will click on the video. It worked during our practice run, so hopefully it works this time as well.
So I want to thank you all for joining the CSE Annual Review Workshop for employees. It's a very important workshop to help all of the staff within CSE achieve the best performance they can be, to help CSE be the best organization that it can be. So the recently published CSE Staff Employee Engagement Survey showed that there is a high level of engagement at CSE amongst the staff. However, it was made clear that there are opportunities to improve upon this in view of the performance management process. And we heard you, and this workshop that we're offering is an effort to respond to some of the suggestions provided for improvement, including a greater emphasis on the employee development opportunities, having the supervisors actively engaged in this employee development opportunity. And we hope with this coupling, we'll have an outcome that we all want, which is more satisfied, more fulfilled staff and supervisors that can be really proud of their staff that they're responsible for. Another thing that was made clear in the engagement survey was that there was a desire for the supervisors to provide clear and regular feedback to the employees, not just at the end of the year, but providing feedback throughout the year, not just on what wasn't working, but also what was working really well and should be sort of continued. I can't stress enough that as a university, we're made up of people. There are things that we do here, and we develop ideas at a university, and we communicate those ideas by teaching and by doing research and sending ideas out into the world. And people are a key part of that. The staff within CSE are essential to this. The types of people that make up CSE, there's sort of the faculty, the students, the administration, and the staff. And if you think about those are like 4 legs of a table. If any one of those isn't at the right height, doing the performing sort of in an optimal capacity, you have a wobbly table. and you don't have a really a solid organization. And that's why I really appreciate you all taking the time out to ensure that you're doing what you need to make sure that you're operating and doing your job the best you can. Now, management is a really important process to consistently and equitably create goals that contribute to the work that you need to do, and also a means to provide and receive feedback to improve performance and support development. A lot of times people think about performance reviews as sort of a fearful thing, like you're being evaluated and graded. If they're done well, they're actually an opportunity to yes, point out where things could be improved, but it's also an opportunity to celebrate success and say, this is where things are going really well, and here's how your career could lay out over the next several years within this organization. And so the investment that you can put in to help the supervisors, and the investment the supervisors can put in to help capitalize on the opportunities of the individual should be seen in a really, really positive light. And the fact that you're all sitting here doing this training actually speaks to that. So again, thank you very much, because it's been shown over and over again that effective performance management really increases retention and engagement and satisfaction of talent in an organization. And we want to keep that talent within CSE being satisfied and engaged and successful, because then that leg of the table we know is going to be really solid. So again, have a great workshop. Thanks for everything you do, and look forward to seeing all the great things that come out as a result of your efforts. So thank
Welcome back. Thank you. I realized I hit pause right as he was in the middle of that. So the message from the dean, just connecting to the importance of performance evaluations from the perspective, as he just shared, from that CSE perspective, and connecting it to all of the work that all of the great work that the college is doing. So why specifically performance management? How should it be, or why should it be important to you as a leader? So just if you think about the work that needs to advance, and we heard it from the dean's message as well, it really involves, engaging and interacting with others that you work with and those employees that you support. So as we go through this workshop today, we want it to be a discussion. Think about how these apply to you, what works for your style, what works for your employee, for your team, for the work that you need to accomplish over the course of the coming years, or how things went over this past year as well. So as we go through these best practices, really think about the best way for you to support them, given your style and the support that your team needs as well. We will be, one thing to point out too, we will be monitoring the chat. Eric and I will be watching that. So if you do have any questions that come up along the way, please feel free to throw it in the chat so we will be watching for them. So simplified performance management. On the slide here, this is the visual of the overall process. The three components that we're referring to when we say performance management are those goals set at the beginning of the year, those broad and challenging priorities, setting the expectation for what the employees need to work on throughout the performance review period. The ongoing conversations, those quality conversations, or it's that continuous dialogue between the supervisor and the employee, in order to get feedback, talk about goals, discuss things during the year. And then the final piece is that formal review. So writing and delivering a meaningful review process to capture the performance in review. So performance management, it's this collection of activities, and it's designed to improve both the individual and the organizational performance by engaging in these practices, the goals, the ongoing conversations, and the quality reviews at the end of the year. The data produced from this process are often used to make decisions about people, which could include things like job assignments, developmental opportunities, promotions, terminations, etc. So it's really important to do this because of the impact it does have, and because how it informs decisions about people. It's important to do it equitably and effectively. So that's what the best practices are really designed to promote and foster. So we're going to take a quick spin through these first two pieces, the goals and the ongoing check-ins, and then we're going to spend some additional time digging into the details of that formal review at the end of the year. And then we'll move into navigator strategies to navigate a difficult conversation. So the process starts with setting goals. And goals, the purpose of the goals are to get the right work done effectively throughout the year. So to make sure that the time, the effort is focused in ways that are productive and positive to the work throughout the year. So in order for goals to be effective, there's strategies here listed on this slide. Goals should be simple. They should be specific, important, and measurable. They should describe the what and the how. So the outcome that is expected to come out of working through this goal, and also the behavior. So how do we engage in the role or in the goal in order to accomplish it successfully? It should be aligned. So it should be connected to, and the employee should understand how it contributes to the larger team, unit, department, college level goals. Focused or few in number. So at any one given time, having 1 to 3 goals is the most effective way to approach goal setting. That's not to say that you can't have more than that during the course of a performance review period, but at any one given time, 1 to 3 goals is the most effective way to strategize the time and the focus on goals. It could be the case that a particular goal is complete during the summer months or halfway through the performance review cycle, and then maybe another one is added. So holistically, over the course of the last 12 months, you may have more than 3 goals. And then they should also be flexible. So adjusted in real time. That's where the ongoing conversations also are really beneficial, that you have continuous conversations or maintain that dialogue throughout the year so that the goals can flex as resources become more or less available. Resources could be, physical resources, people resources, money resources, whatever those resources may be, but adjusted in a way that allows the employee to still be and continue to be successful in achieving those goals throughout the year. After the goals are set, it's the ongoing check-ins, which are the conversation between the manager and the employee during the year. This is the when and where performance management happens. So this is kind of the energy motivating and driving performance management throughout the year. These types of conversations, they may not necessarily be new to you. They may have happened, for years now. Maybe they're just called something different. Monthly meetings or biweekly meetings or individual check-ins, whatever they may be. But the purpose is just to stay connected during the year. With ongoing check-ins too, and the best practices suggest when it comes to the check-ins, at least quarterly, checking in, spending about 15 to 20 minutes quarterly to check in specifically about the goals. So you may have more frequent conversations about those operational tasks or job duties that need to be accomplished on that daily, weekly basis, just to keep things, moving in your space on your team. But it's being intentional, at least quarterly, to discuss how the goals are, the progress on the goals, and how things are going, or what additional support might be needed in order to continue to be successful in those goals. Strategies for ongoing check-ins. At a really high level, the first thing or the best practice would suggest that discussing roles and responsibilities. So again, if these are already set or established, it may not necessarily be a new first step for you, but just making sure that both you and the employee understand that it's an active participatory discussion. The employee, should feel free to bring agenda items or conversation or questions to the meeting as well. So it really remains valuable and it's a two-way discussion. So then during the ongoing check-ins, or when you do come together, it's reviewing and updating goals. So where are things at that point in time? Where's the progress? What feedback does the employee need or do you need to give? And then determining the next step. So that's the who does what by when step. Between that point and the next time you meet, understanding who will be working on what in order to make progress into the next meeting. And then the final piece, which we're going to be digging into more today, is this performance evaluation or the meaningful review. And it's writing and delivering performance evaluations. And again, the high-level strategy here are the 3 big focus areas are preparing for the discussion, writing the narrative, and then delivering it. And then there's some additional steps underneath that we're going to walk through. For the performance evaluations, the ongoing check-ins, and the goals, there are quick guides and additional resources to provide details about each one of these aspects of the performance management process. So you may have received those in email already. We have resources at the end to connect you to as well, but just know there's a lot of details and a lot of support available beyond what we're doing beyond this workshop today. You'll also get the slides from the workshop today as well. So you'll have these for reference throughout the process. So before diving into the strategies for doing it, a little bit about the form. It's very common when thinking about performance management, people equate this to the form. So the question we often get is, okay, well, what about the form? Where's the form? That's what people equate to performance management. Rather than thinking that way, performance management is driving that progress toward those important goals and priorities, and it's not just about filling out the form. So the form is important. It's newer to CSE, so we are going to take a preview and a spin through how to access it and to point you to resources in order to do that successfully. But walking through the process first, because that's really the performance management piece of it. So transitioning now to these cycle end activities, so the writing and delivering the meaningful performance review. And as you are sitting down to write and deliver and think through these steps, a couple of things to point out here to increase to mitigate bias, I should say, when it comes to performance reviews. Even with best intentions, bias often creeps up into performance reviews. So just making you aware of common rater errors in the next slide, some steps to mitigate bias in order to make sure that these the performance evaluations are effective and as equitable as possible. Again, you'll have these slides for reference, so I would encourage you to review these and reflect on these when it gets closer to actually writing and delivering the review, so it's fresh in your mind. We're going to go over them in a pretty high level at this point during the presentation. But there's 5 common rater errors, it's not an all-inclusive list, but these are the most common ones. That first one there is lack of differentiation. So it is not differentiating in the review, in the narrative, or the rating, even though performance differentiates a lot. So it's basically equating all performance equally when it's not. So that's why it's an error. The recency effect, it is putting more weight or more focus on events that happened more recently than over the entire span of the performance review process, and taking into account all the performance that happened over the year. The halo and horn effect occurs when a particular aspect about an employee, they're highly competent or highly incompetent about a particular thing, and that spreads, or that they are other aspects of their performance, other aspects of their performance are rated either elevated, inflated, or deflated based on one particular competency that they have. So halo if it's inflated, and horns if it's deflated or if it's minimized. Personal bias is favoritism. So if it's something that knowing the person or having a personal relationship or a friendship or with the employee, and letting that favoritism creep in. And then that last one, inaccurate information or lack of preparation. It's not taking the due diligence to prepare or to gather the scope of information that would be helpful to write a meaningful or effective performance evaluation. So all of these rater errors can be minimized or somewhat mitigated by having the ongoing conversations throughout the year. So as you have those conversations throughout the year, as you gather the notes and capture those things, you don't have to rely on things that just happened recently, or you don't have to rely on just one particular event, or you'll have more examples to differentiate that performance. So really making sure that that continuous dialogue occurring throughout the year can really promote effectiveness at this year-end review time. And then the other piece, additional things that leaders can do to mitigate bias in the performance evaluation process. Here it's making sure that it's consistent use of best practices and guidance, which is shared here in the resources and tools that we have, and making sure that a meaningful narrative and a meaningful delivery is given to all employees. So making sure that everybody has that time and attention in order to support their performance. So then it's getting ready. So those are just some considerations to increase your awareness around them. Again, things to be mindful of and to be intentionally mindful of as you get into that specific time and space to sit down and prepare and write and deliver the pieces of the performance evaluation. So this prepare piece, it's laying the groundwork. gathering information in order to make sure that the performance evaluation is as effective and as objective as possible. So here's a quick 2-item checklist when it comes to preparing for the final review, or to write the final review. Making sure that goals are in the system, that they're updated. So this might be telling your employees, get your goals updated so you can reflect on them, so you can see what progress is made, what success they have had over the previous year. And then for ongoing check-ins, if you have been keeping notes, wherever those notes may be, gathering them so you have them for reference in order to inform your the performance narrative. So steps 1 and 2 when it comes to preparing is about gathering input. So first from employees. So asking employees to write about their goals, specifically the situation, the action, the results, the impact that the goals that they achieved had on your work or on your team, or advancing key priorities. Not asking them, so it says they will not be asked to do a self-rating. It's not recommended in best practices. Employee self-ratings can typically be inflated, which can set the conversation up to be defensive or unproductive between the supervisor and the employee. So it's not very useful. So it's something that this process does not ask of employees. The other step 2 there is asking input from others. So in addition to asking the employee for input about their own performance throughout the year and your own observations that you've had, you can consider asking others for input as well. So this could be anybody that the employee works with, could be, you could ask just in a formal, informal conversation via email. It might be a survey that you send out, via Google form or Qualtrics or whatever mechanism or technology that is useful as well, to ask how others that have worked with your employee, what their experience was, or any performance feedback as well. A couple of considerations when asking input from others. First, be sure that if you ask for one employee, you ask for all employees. That increases the equity. So making sure that an employee doesn't feel targeted or by asking for input from others for them and not for others. The other thing too, when asking for others, would be letting them know why they're being asked and what the information will be used for, sharing that it's going to help inform the performance review at the end of the performance period, not sharing names or specifics, but rather taking all of the input from others and theming it and bringing that into the narrative as well. And then again, some different mechanisms for doing that: conversation, email, survey. When you do get the data that validate down there, is just making sure that it is relevant, it is useful, making sure that one, angry person isn't trying to say something erroneous or negative about the particular employee's performance. So making sure that it does fit within the broader scope of performance that you have observed about the employee. So steps 3 and 4 here in preparing, it is evaluating. So beginning to think about what they accomplish, how they accomplish it, considering the outcomes, the impact, and also the behaviors that they engaged in as well. So these would all be pieces to inform the overall narrative. And then once you've gathered the input, prepared, it's sitting down to write the performance narrative. So when it comes to the performance review, it's the narrative and it's the rating. So those will be the 2 pieces that you will be asked to submit as part of the formal process. So for the narrative, it's taking the time to be thoughtful and specific, providing specific examples, describing the what, the how that you saw the employee engage in, can be informed by that input that you gathered in steps 1 and 2, and also describing the impact as well. Should focus on the goals. So the goals that were accomplished, those expectations set at the beginning of the year. The narrative piece, it's really important to make sure it is descriptive. It is a really important part of the feedback that the employee can receive from you to understand how their performance was relative to the expectations that were set at the beginning of the year. It also provides the context and the justification for the rating. So writing the narrative and then provide the rating after that. So that it is a simplified 3-point scale that you will see in the system. It requires improvement, meets expectations, and exceeds expectations. The exceeds expectations should really be reserved for that performance that is above and beyond or exceeds the expectations that were set out at the beginning of the year and does so consistently. The meeting expectation is more descriptive of performance. That is just that. It is meeting those expectations that are set out at the beginning of the year. The performance is as expected. It is going well, maybe sometimes above and beyond, but not consistently. And then requires improvement is not meeting expectations. So something that falls short of the expectations that were set. So having a more complex rating scale, it was simplified to 3. Something more complex doesn't necessarily make the process better. So adding complexity doesn't necessarily add meaningful benefit to the process. And most employees that work hard, deliver results will fit in that meets expectations. So that's where a majority of employees will fall, in that these are expectations set and they're meeting those expectations. It can be easy to focus on that number or that label because it is so concrete, but the focus should be more on the narrative, and that's where the meaningful feedback and the valuable feedback exists. So the focus should be less on the rating and more on the narrative itself. Sometimes it can be challenging because we want to be nice and we want everybody to do the best that they can, but it's not necessarily the most effective way to manage performance. There can sometimes be that tendency to inflate if somebody has a hard year or inflate a rating for an employee because they have a hard year, but then it just kind of creates, create for future years. It's not being honest and transparent with the employee in areas that they can improve for future years as well. So in the long term, it may not be, it might be hard to do in the short term, but in the long term, it's setting them up for, fair and honest feedback so they can grow and develop in meaningful ways. Some additional considerations for this when assigning the rating, it's considering the performance across the entire year. So again, not looking at just one specific event or one specific point in time, but considering that rating across the entire year. It's also considering both the contributions, the what and the how. So what they contributed, what that impact was, and also how they went about achieving that goal or being successful in that particular goal. Eric, anything to add at this point? Any additional considerations or clarifications that would be important?
No, that being said, I mean, I'll make a comment, and I think it's something that perhaps leaders and supervisors think about. I mean, in terms of ratings, and I think oftentimes, if you have years in an institution where there may not be significant merit available, or there's not really other ways to be able to reward employees. Oftentimes, supervisors, leaders, they'll default to the review, as that one opportunity that they have to be able to say, hey, doing a fantastic job. And I think, at least in my experience, past experience, this is where you see, some of the rating inflation happening. In terms of leaders that will, because they don't have other ways to be able to recognize and reward, they're going to, say, well, they're exceeding expectations. And there could be, reasons to support that. But my caution always is, there's a certain point where the institution returns to being able to do something more fundamental from a reward and recognition perspective, from a merit perspective, for example. And oftentimes what happens then is you kind of get yourself into a pattern where, the employee sort of expects or sees, or maybe perhaps feels entitled to having, an elevated rating. And I think that's the kind of cautionary sort of tale here in terms of just, looking at the performance review as being indicative of what it is that you're seeing. Not necessarily the environment that it might be coming from, but certainly I think that, when you have these ongoing discussions and conversations with folks, I think that's, the perfect opportunity to be able to continue to sort of maintain alignment, maintain visibility and awareness and understanding of what it is that the employee might be facing in terms of challenges. And certainly the last couple of years, have given us many instances in which there have been challenges that we've all had to face and overcome. And certainly for what that I've seen, there's been a great degree of resiliency. And certainly to be, reflecting that in your comments is certainly appropriate. Again, it's just cautioning you in terms of making that sort of secondary leap of going into and looking at a rating that may not necessarily reflect, in fact, that consistent performance that you were talking about before, Christina. And I think really emphasizing that is key.
Thank you, Eric. So next we are going to move into activity. We're going to break you into small groups here in a moment, and we would like you to practice or refresh yourselves in assigning ratings. So there are the three labels there: requires improvement, meets expectation, and exceeds expectation. That top table there is what you will see in the system or in the performance appraisal tool when you assign the rating. So it's the rating with that brief description. Then underneath that, there's three employees. Again, just examples for the purposes of this activity, very short and succinct. So please feel free to be creative about this. We realize we're not giving you a lot of information to go with, but just want kind of to practice or get some additional experience in thinking through these and having some conversation with others in the workshop today. So we're going to send you to breakout groups for about 5 to 6 minutes for you to discuss these three employees. Decide what rating would you give this employee or that employee, and also why. And then we'll come back to the large group and have you share some of your thoughts in the ratings that you assigned these three particular employees. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing for a moment. I think Lindsay was going to create the breakout rooms, but before joining the breakout room that you are assigned, I'm going to throw a link in the chat for you to grab, which is reflective of all of this information on the slide, so you have it for reference as you move into your small groups. So make sure you grab the link, and Eric and Lindsay, if you want to just double check to make sure it does work so everybody can access that, or let us know if you can't. And once you're asked to join a group, if you could do that in 5 or 6 minutes, we will see you back here in this large group. And then we can also pause the recording too at this time. I think we're going to hit record again. So after writing and delivering the reviews, where we just came from, the narrative and assigning the rating based on the narrative, it's delivering the performance review to the employee. Before the meeting, some considerations here. Sharing the written review is always a helpful best practice. The employee can review and understand and maybe process, get some, write down any questions or think through questions that they may have to have a more productive conversation at the review time. Sharing a written review, it could be an hour ahead of time, a day ahead of time. It's, there's no exact set limit. It's whatever works best for you and your team. And then make sure there's a clear time, technology, all of that stuff is set up and shared as well. And then during the meeting, it's helpful to, explain the process. Maybe for any new employees on your team, it might be more important to just kind of share some of the more process and the context piece to it. Sharing or explaining, elaborate on any pieces of the narrative, maybe beyond what you wrote. Discussing how the rating was determined, if that, if it should be clear, hopefully, but maybe elaborating or providing some more context about that. And then having some time to have a two-way conversation. So asking questions, giving them time to ask for their thoughts as well. A couple of additional considerations when it comes to delivering virtually. The first one there, it says conduct the ongoing check-ins to set the conversation up for success. So having those regular conversations throughout the year, building that rapport, kind of building that trusted relationship, the conversation at the end of the year is just naturally going to be more easier. Checking the logistics to minimize any distractions, make sure you have the technology and time set up, which we saw a moment ago, and then paying close attention to the body language and tone to avoid misunderstanding. So obviously with virtual delivery, you have the computer in the conversation as well as just you and the employee. So it might be more since you're not in the same room, you're a bit removed, it might be being more mindful about how your comments or how the feedback, how they're interpreting that, how they are responding to that. So we're going to switch slightly now to navigating difficult performance conversations. So, ideally the performance evaluation that you are delivering, it's positive, it's easy, it's a great conversation to build that rapport, to build development strategies, to set the employee up for success in the coming years. It isn't always realistic that everyone is going to go that easily or smoothly. So these are some strategies to keep in mind that to navigate those difficult performance conversations if they do occur, and to address issues in real time rather than waiting and deferring and hoping they go away. So the first thing to prevent conversation or difficult conversations is really providing timely feedback. So again, that continuous dialogue throughout the year that, adjust in real time. It minimizes the problems from spinning out of control or arising to larger problems or creating additional problems as well that then you need to go on to solve. So providing that timely feedback is really the key to preventing them. Then also the other piece too is the no surprises. So making sure that it is given in a timely manner, that at the end of the year, there aren't large surprises that you're dropping on the employee, and giving them that amount of time to process and understand and course correct in real time so that they can be successful. But if you do find yourself in a difficult conversation, again, some considerations or some strategies to keep in mind to do this effectively. So 4 pieces here. It's preparing yourself, preparing the feedback, having the conversation, and revisiting it. So this might be something as you're moving into the performance evaluation conversation and delivering it, if you anticipate it being more difficult, or maybe it's just something that pops up during the year that you need to sit down with an employee and give them some critical feedback that might not necessarily be easy. By definition, difficult conversations are difficult. So hopefully relying on these strategies can allow some more comfort or confidence when doing this. So step 1, it's preparing yourself. So first it's understanding the information side and then the emotional side of the situation as you prepare yourself in both those aspects. So make sure you understand the accuracy of the situation, seeking out different perspectives, if the situation were to happen, just gathering additional information to make sure that you have more than just your perspective involved. Anticipating the emotional reactions or comfort level. Again, difficult conversations are difficult. They're not necessarily fun to have. So just make sure that you understand, how comfort or how your comfort level is, making sure that you identify any triggers that might set you off during the conversation. If this is an employee that maybe this is the 5th time that you are asking them to or providing the same feedback and it's more frustrating for you, so that you might just be going in with more of an elevated emotion than if this was the first time that you were addressing it. So just being aware of those things in order to, or anticipate those things, I should say, to be aware of them if they do happen in the moment, that you can course correct or pause or do something more effective to keep the conversation focused and productive. Preparing the feedback comes into making sure you have a clear objective about the conversation. So make sure that you know exactly or essentially what it is. It's what you want the employee to take away from the conversation and why. And you can see there some of the characteristics or qualities of the effective objective. So leading the conversation or moving into the conversation because you want a productive outcome, or if it's something, it's specific behavior or performance, or there's a group dynamic that needs to be changed in order to work together better as a team. Ineffective ways are going into conversations, trying to change people's mindsets, opinions, or exert power over them. So it's just being clear about what is the purpose of that conversation and keeping the focus on that objective and working to that end. So here are some examples of some objectives. This first one here is ineffective. So if your objective was to go into the conversation toward the employee that they need to drop their negative opinions and get on board, not a very effective way. You're trying to change their opinion. There's some evaluation in that their opinion is negative and they just need to forget what they are thinking and get along with the group. Here's another objective that is effective. the team's, I double clicked there. The team's culture feedback needs to be restored. I need to coach this person on how to receive critical feedback. So more effective, it's that team culture piece of it. It's that coaching aspect of it. It's understanding that, or leading with a thought that helping the employee and supporting the employee through this particular piece in order for the team to get along better, which is important for performance goals, team priorities, etc. And then this last one also, an effective way to approach, not ineffective, but an effective way to approach. The feedback that I've been providing is not being followed. I need to discuss with the employee and understand why. So again, going in with curiosity and exploration to understand, what is preventing this employee. It may not be the employee's fault that they're not following feedback. There might be other roadblocks or obstacles unaware to you that might be standing in their way that is causing them to continue to behaving or not following the feedback previously given. And then the last piece of the feedback is role playing or mentally rehearsing. Sometimes it is helpful to run it by a trusted advisor or peer or somebody else in order to make sure that the intention or that objective is effective or comes across to others in the same way that you intended to. So it's, productivity. And then prepare, but don't script. So again, making sure that you do have that purpose kind of, in the back of your mind as to why you're going into this conversation and what you hope to get out of it, where you hope to land, but not scripting in the sense that you don't want to be so tied to a script that you can't be flexible in real time to the conversation that's happening. And then meeting with the employee. So this might be during the performance review or maybe throughout the year, but leading with respect first. Approaching with openness and understanding and checking assumptions at the door. The more difficult the conversation or the issue is, the more effort may be required in order to be intentional to be open. Setting the assumptions aside, the employee on the other side of the conversation may not look like you, may have had different experiences, different education, different whatever than you. So it's helpful to intentionally acknowledge that you're there to listen, learn, explore solutions, support them. If you do make missteps, it's inviting them to share that or point that out to you and correcting, apologizing, and moving forward. So there's a statement on the slide there. My intentions are to understand the situation, but I might make any missteps. If I do, I ask that you let me know. So it's really, coming in, laying the groundwork for respect so you can have a productive conversation, especially if it's something that, especially if it, in this case, if it's a difficult situation. And then giving the specific feedback. So using the situation behavior impact framework, describing the situation, the behavior that they that you observed or that they acted on in the situation, and then also the result of that. It keeps things more objective than using an opinion or an evaluative statement. So here's an example of that. When Tyler gave you feedback and you told him you didn't know what he was talking about. Is the situation, you told him he didn't know what he was talking about was the behavior. And then the rest of the team feels uncomfortable and is worried about giving feedback. So in this case, Tyler gave this particular employee feedback. The employee made a comment back. Now everybody feels uncomfortable given the situation. So again, hopefully you can see that it's specific to the situation, the behavior that that employee did, and then the impact as well. So after providing that feedback, opening it with respect and curiosity, listening to understand. So making sure that you allow the employee time to explain, understand their perspective and work toward a solution, setting expectations and next steps. So what should be happening post conversation, or what should be different, or what are the expectations beyond the conversation, and being clear about that. And then after that, while the conversation may come to a close at that time, the work continues until it's resolved. So it's important to revisit the issue in the future and continue to support your employee in the ways that were discussed, or hold them accountable to the expectations that were set in that conversation. So making sure that the problem doesn't reoccur or spin into another issue that then just, becomes another difficult conversation that needs to be had. So with that, we talked about the performance evaluations, walked through the prepare, write, and deliver steps. We talked about the navigating difficult performance strategies. If that is something that occurs during this process or at other times throughout the year so you can address those more effectively. Any questions, thoughts at this time? Seeing and hearing none. I'm going to move forward, but if anybody does have any, please stop me, or Eric, if you see anything in chat, please. And these are just some questions that just wanted to pose to see additional thoughts, or if there were questions or similar questions to this end. Before we move into the tool itself, we'll take a quick spin and do a preview of the performance appraisal tool. But when it comes to thinking about the performance evaluation process this year and writing and delivering a meaningful performance review, does any challenges, tips, insights, topics that might arise, any questions or thoughts about what you might anticipate, experiences from the past, or kind of where your team currently is? Thoughts or questions?
So this is, I guess, not really a question on anything we've discussed so far, but I'm remembering from last year that there was something about certain people who don't need to do like faculty usually, like the faculty employees. Can you just remind me who's kind of exempt from doing a performance evaluation in this way?
Great question.
Yeah.
Okay. Go ahead.
Yeah.
Go for it, Eric.
Yeah. So when the performance appraisal tool PAT system was implemented, going back last fiscal year, I think, there was a decision at that time that those that are civil service and labor represented would have reviews done through the PAT system. It would be optional for all other staff. So for your P&A, others, that it is something that's absolutely encouraged. And I think, certainly from the standpoint of what it is that you've seen outlined here and described, from a framework perspective, including the emphasis on ongoing conversations, I think is really good. And Lindsay is clarifying that. So thank you very much, Lindsay. So civil service required, but not for the labor represented, but again, strongly encouraged. So apologies for the miscommunication there, but certainly it is something that, again, as you look at this framework, I think it's one that speaks really well for the type of feedback that I think is really important to share with employees during this time.
Yes, great question. And thank you for asking that. Sometimes it's those small details that are small, but most important when it comes to doing this effectively. And to Eric's point too, it's really, again, the conversation or that dialogue throughout that year of when and where performance management is actually occurring and providing that feedback, regardless of using the system to formally evaluate or not. Hopefully you find those helpful strategies in managing or interacting and engaging any of your employees that you supervise. So next, we'll flip to this next screen here. So the PAT, the performance appraisal tool, is the system designed to support this. So it's the pieces to walk through or to provide information to are aligned to that goals, the ongoing conversation, and the performance review at the end. So it's here to support it. It's not, again, the form isn't performance management, but it does support that and it builds in efficiencies throughout it. So we're going to take a really quick spin through this site, and then we have some screenshots of the actual tool itself. I don't have a sandbox that we can log in and play with. This resource or this website will be at the end of the slide deck. I think it's been shared in other communications as well. So you'll have access to all of this information. If not, you can always reach out and ask. This is a performance management site. So this is the main OHR site for all things performance management. And when you click on the site, you'll see there's an overview of performance management. There's information about each of the different activities. If my page will cooperate with me here. Each of the different activities. On the left-hand side here of these links, you can get additional information about goals. This is where the resources are about the quick guides and the videos, strategies to set effective goals. You have one for ongoing conversations, and then another one for performance evaluations, which is the information we went over today. For all of those pieces of those activities, there's a short video for each one of them explaining the overall strategies, which I think is a really good way to just remind, it's a good reminder of those key strategies in order to be effective in these areas. And then the other one here, the performance appraisal tool, is where you would click to access the tool itself. This is something that was developed in-house about 10, maybe 15, going on 15 years ago now. We realize it's not the most beautiful tool, but hopefully it builds in more efficiencies than you had in previous years. So a description of what the performance appraisal tool is, along with links to accessing it, both from the employee and from the supervisor standpoint. There is no in-person synchronous training around the system. Hopefully you find it pretty easy and hard to get lost in. There's just a couple of places to click to go to access or to use the system effectively, but there are videos and guides that do help navigate, or you can always reach out to Eric or myself if you do have additional questions that you can't find answers to as far as navigating the system itself. So flipping back to the content here. So that's how you access it. That's how you go into the system. Once you do click on that and you log in using your X.500, it takes you to one of these two screens, the employee view or the supervisor view. The supervisor view, actually, there is one screen before this. It'll take you to a list of all your employees, I believe. And then when you click on that, click on whatever employee it is, it would bring you to this landing page for the particular employee. There's two options there where you'll see in the red circle at the bottom on the employee view, entering goals and doing the performance evaluation. So that's the form. Supervisors have the same on their side, but down by B, you'll see the third option of that overall rating. So when you click on goals at that number one option there, it takes you to this screen, and this is where you would capture the goals at the beginning of the year. They can be updated throughout the year. At the end of the year, they are captured and archived as the review period closes out. So it's title, description, completion date, or completed date. And one note of caution for this is when you do type in this area, it types over, it doesn't save during the year. So if you delete something during the year or type over something during the year, it's not going to save the previous version, but it does archive it and save it at the end of the year. So whatever's there at the end, it does grab it and archive it for that particular performance year. The goal, I should mention as well, the goal view is shared between the employee and the supervisor. So so the employee can set their goals, the supervisor can go in and look, or there can be some collaboration around that as well to create those goals. And clicking on number 2 from that landing page brings you to the performance evaluation, or this is the form, if you will. Here's the employee view and the supervisor view as well. The employee view is shared throughout the year between the employee and the supervisor. It's open throughout the year. So this might be the spot where if you want to use this place as a place to capture ongoing conversations or notes or key accomplishments during the year, it's then available at the end, and it might just be a matter of revising what is already there and then, forwarding it or sharing it rather than starting from a blank screen. So again, or you can copy and paste into it as well. Again, whatever works best for you. On the supervisor side, you will see that there's an additional supervisor box. On that box, it's a supervisor view only. The employee doesn't see that section. So if there's comments or additional information that it's helpful to capture throughout the year for that particular employee, that would be a place or space that it can be captured. Any other thoughts or questions about this? So one thing we did share with the employees, I think their workshop was yesterday, although my work week seems to be very, very long and short at the same time. But when it comes to writing the narrative, both on the employee input side or maybe it's your side as well, there's no right or wrong format to put it in. If it's bullet points, if it's paragraphs, if it's short sentences, whatever fits your style the best in writing and written or providing written feedback to the employee. That's something we shared with them as well when it comes to providing their employee input. So if you do want it in a certain style or a preferred way, that might be a conversation, an expectation to share with your employees to make sure that it's most effective in coming together or having them provide that information to you as well. Eric, anything to add about the system before we flip forward to next steps and dates?
Nope, you're good. Thank you.
Okay. Not seeing any questions either. So next steps and dates, I'm going to turn it over to Eric to share with you these key dates and action items.
Yeah, so it's hard to believe, the review period is finishing up here as of the 28th. As that happens, and as was discussed during the employee training yesterday, employees will then begin preparing a performance evaluation by completing their narrative in the PAT system. And then this will be submitted to you, obviously, as the supervisor, at which time then, you can start to prepare performance evaluations as well by asking for input. It could be from other employees, others. Not certain what the practice is necessarily within each of your particular departments, but certainly that is an option for you. During the month of April, the supervisors, you folks will be completing the performance evaluations, including the narrative and rating. And then supervisor, you and the employee will meet to discuss so that by the 30th of April, we're seeing that all reviews are completed and entered into the PAT system. And so certainly the linked resources that Christina talked to before provides a really good foundation and some great training videos and other information as to how to get that entered into the PAT system. So if you have any questions with that, certainly refer to those resources. Obviously, you can reach out to myself as well. And I'm happy to help as well. Beginning in May, then we'll be looking at supervisors, employees discussing goals and for the next review period. So within short order of completing the review for the current fiscal year, we'll start to consider what it is that we want to accomplish going forward. And here, I guess I just want to bring back to all of you, what you heard, I think Dean Aline speak to a bit in his video remarks. The fact that as we look at the engagement survey results as a whole, again, kind of collectively throughout CSE, there was, I think, good feedback, good information regarding having those conversations with supervisors around developmental opportunities, and what are the ways that you as their supervisor can support those efforts. And I certainly think from a goal perspective, there's opportunities there, for sure, to be able to have those kind of conversations and incorporate developmental goals within the larger goal structure. So I encourage you to think about that, reflect on how that might, be a consideration as you have those conversations with folks. And again, just wanted to highlight the fact that it's coming directly from the engagement survey. So just wanted to make you aware of that. And then finally, for May through February of 2023, so the new review period, this is the opportunity to be able to have those ongoing conversations and be able to apply, from the methodology perspective of what you learned today, how it is that you might be able to best prepare yourself for that review conversation then in the next review period. So it's really, I think, an opportunity here to have some really good conversations and discussions during that period of time. And I just encourage you to continue to look at, using these tools and principles. And I think that you'll find that will make for a really meaningful review conversation then as we finish out not only this review period, but upcoming review periods as well.
Thank you, Eric. A couple of additional resources we wanted to share. The performance management site, this will be sent out, but this is that site that I visited a moment ago, the hub of all things performance management for OHR. And the other one is the supervisory development course. That one is all things supervisory, developed and designed by LTD. So in the places where performance management and the supervisory overlap, it's the same information. So either site, same performance management. The supervisory development site has things beyond performance management that would be important for the supervisor role as well. So those are just additional resources to connect you to, if that is helpful, as you navigate and as you close out the performance review cycle for this particular year. Any questions, or Eric, any additional things to share at this point? Awesome. I'm going to stop sharing and just say thank you to everyone for joining us here today. Again, if you do have any questions, please feel free to reach out, visit the website, lots of resources there to hopefully jumpstart you or find you the answer. You can find the answer that you need in order to be successful in navigating this process and the system. So thanks again, everyone.